Welcome to the Grassroots Army podcast. This platform is for common sense people looking for up-to-date, accurate, and truthful information without the hot garbage corporate media bias. The power of one can lead to the power of many. You never know what small act that you may say or do that may literally change the lives of millions tomorrow. And don't you ever think that you can't make a difference, because you can. Good morning, my fellow Michiganders. Good morning, my fellow Americans. Welcome to the Grassroots Army podcast. I'm, of course, your host, Garrett Soldano, and I have a special guest on here today. I'm going to bring Mr. Mike Cox on the platform here to talk about his platform on why he's running for governor. But just to give you a little history on Mike, very impressive resume. He obviously was a Marine back in the early 80s. And after his time there, he went to U of M. Not a fan of U of M. Played at Western Michigan University. Go Broncos. All right. But hey, at least he's not from Ohio State. But he got his degree there. And then he started as a litigator. And very impressive. Okay. In the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office, where he served until 2002, which we're going to get into, where he narrowly defeated Democrat Gary Peters. That's awesome. Okay. He gained recognition trying over 125 jury cases, and eventually became chief of the homicide unit. And then fast forward 2002, where he beat Gary Peters in the Michigan Attorney General race, becoming the first Republican to hold that office since 1955. Okay. He was reelected in 2006 and served in 2011. And he led a staff of nearly 270 attorneys, recovering a record $3.2 billion for Michigan consumers and saving taxpayers over $1.7 billion in state lawsuit defenses. In 2010, he ran for governor, which I did not know, finished third in the Republican primary behind Rick Snyder and Pete Hoekstra. So we have something in common. We both finished third in the Republican primary. So let me bring Mike on. Good morning, Mike. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Garrett. Good being here today. Looking forward.
I have to ask you this. I know many Marines. Number one, thank you for your service.
Thank you.
But I want to talk to you real quick before we get into your platform and what you plan on bringing to the table as Michigan's next governor.
Right.
But after 9/11 happened in 2002, I know you're probably pretty heavy into the Attorney General race at that time.
Yeah.
But as a Marine, did something stir into you around what, 40, 41 years of age at that time? Did something say, hey, I want to get back into the fight?
It absolutely did. I was still running marathons then, not anymore. And I was ready to go. But I had 4 kids at the time. And one of them beat me to it. So my oldest daughter, Lindsay, who's my Marine Corps baby, she kind of shapes my view of the Mississippi Miracle, because if you follow me on social media, you see that she lives in Mississippi now. But at any rate, Lindsay was at Eastern, a MAC competitor of yours. And so she dropped out of Eastern with a buddy of hers, Becky Brooks, and the two of them went in on the Marine Corps on the buddy program. And my wife and I were beside ourselves, as you can imagine, but also proud. And so my daughter did 13 months in Fallujah in 2003 and 4 when everything was happening there. Women aren't in combat arms, but she was a communications tech, so she had to go off the base by helicopter and truck. And so she was around a lot of people being killed. And she doesn't have a combat action ribbon, but I joked over the weekend, I was at a VFW for the Van Buren Republican Party Lincoln Day, that both my dad, who fought in Korea, and my daughter, who was in Iraq, can both go to the VFW and buy me a beer, but I can't buy them a beer.
Well, especially in today's warfare, you don't have to be at front lines anymore to be in combat, obviously. So my goodness, thank you for her service. And that was a tough time in that battle. That is for sure. Let's fast forward now. So you lose in the Republican primary, like I did. We both finished in third. And Kevin Rinke talks about this. No matter if you finish second, third, and fourth, it's not good to be the dog in that position, because that's all you're seeing is the front dog's butt.
Right.
So
getting back to that, it was a very odd race. I think Governor Snyder did some good things as governor, but he was a clear moderate. And so I've been through the ringer before where I was first, third, first, second, back to first, and a week out tied with Pete and Rick Snyder, and then finished third. And it was kind of the interesting dynamics. Rick spent an inordinate amount of his own money, and that certainly helped him. And then Pete, he was on Fox News all the time because he was speaking out against Obama. He was the spokesperson on Fox News for intelligence. And so, and of course, he had a Dutch name, and that still matters, or still mattered then in West Michigan. And so it was a very odd race. But, my wife told me after 23 years as a prosecutor that the voters told me it was time to go home and make some money for my family. And quite frankly, Garrett, sometimes, you played football at a very high level. Sometimes you don't realize what blessings losses can be. And for me, that certainly was, because my oldest daughter is now 42. My youngest son, who's a Naval Academy grad in the U.S. Navy right now, he's 25. So we had a big gap. And so my younger three were 10 at the time, would have been 10, 12, and 14. And in retrospect, if they had to live with their dad as the governor of the state of Michigan, just all the crap they would have had to take in, it was a blessing, right? And secondly, it was kind of interesting. I remember a donor from West Michigan, and hopefully I'm not running on too long, but a donor from West Michigan, when I ran in 2009, he said, "Mike, I love what you've done as Attorney General," because I would tell him how we reduced the staff size, how we did this, how we reorganized, recovered $200 million in Medicaid fraud, all those kinds of things. And he said, "I love what you're doing, but you've never been in business. And I want a businessman." And so when I lost for the first time at age 48 or 9, I had to start my own business, literally in the same office I'm in right now. Started all by myself, eventually had 18 employees, and went from, zero money up to past 3 years. I've averaged over $40 million in revenues in just a little over a decade. So I've kind of been in the public sector and succeeded. And now I've been in the private sector, built a business, had that stress. And I know you have it as in your professional practice, right? As a podiatrist, like maybe we all do it different.
Chiropractor, not a podiatrist.
I'm sorry, chiropractor. I'm sorry. Okay. And I know that because off the air, we talked about, you gave me some recommendations. But at any rate, so you know how that is to keep the lights on and keep people paid. And I remember in one of the cases I had $1 million out, and I pay my folks every 15th and 30th, and it's like the 12th. It was like a Tuesday, and I had $3,000 in my account, and my payroll was $73,000, and you're like, but you figure it out, and so it taught me a lot.
So you said you made $40 million in revenue during that time?
Oh, past 3 years, I've averaged over 40 a year. Wow. I was involved in, I did a lot of business litigation after I got out. I did, one auto supplier, soon an auto supplier. Then I got into, some of your viewers may know that, the fight between Governor Snyder and the Ambassador Bridge Company. It was, the Gordie Howe Bridge is about to be finished. It's the only time that Michigan's built a bridge where it didn't go through the legislature. Talk about abuse, and I still think it was wrong. I represented the Maroon family in that. So over time, I gravitated toward folks who were fighting big government, right? And over licensing and denial of wetland permits, or in the case of the Maroons, trying to take their land without proper compensation. Then from that, I got involved a little bit at the tail end of Nassar. And then I led the lawsuit against the University of Michigan, which you may know of simply because you may have played against some of these people. You would have been at the very tail end after that. But for 30 years, they had a doctor who sexually abused athletes. And for the last 4 or 5 years, that's kind of been really my fighting big institutions, when they've done wrong, and primarily all public institutions, unfortunately.
Yeah, that one. Yeah, like you always hear about the Michigan State
Right.
that one was at the headlines, but people forget that U of M had something similar happen. Question about your run in 2010. What were your 3 points on what you were running on in 2010?
It's funny how the issues haven't changed. So the big issues then were, job loss, education achievement, and population loss. And what do we have rearing its head right now? And so, I proposed a $2 billion income tax cut, which was individual income tax cut.
What was the budget back then?
The budget, I want to say, was a little 52 billion as opposed to 83.
Was it that high still? Okay.
Yeah, and that would all come out of the general fund, and so in essence, that would have largely overcut in half the state income tax, and which is a derivative of what I'm advocating now, right? And so those were the big issues, and other issues were I was a Tea Party candidate, right? And so when Tea Party Express came to Michigan, I headlined many of their events because I was an identified Tea Party candidate. I was for right to work, right? Before, I think Mike Bouchard and I were the first people to talk about that, then the others did. At a gubernatorial level, I was the first one and I have to credit Mike Bouchard. And it's kind of interesting because, I grew up, I know a little bit about your background. I grew up the son of a union carpenter, right? My parents are immigrants, legal immigrants, but they're immigrants. And so I had 4 uncles and aunts in the UAW. My brother-in-law, Laura's brother, works building F-150s. But right to work was a big issue to me because it's really about worker empowerment, but also making the state more attractive. And that's really what my tax cut proposal then and enacting right to work then in 2010 were really about making Michigan more competitive. And it's really the roots of what I'm advocating now today.
So the top 3 things, let's say you get in, win the primary, win the general, 3 things that Mike's going to do on day one. What are those issues?
Okay. Well, a couple things. All right. On day one, I'm going to need the legislature for a few things. So I'm going to get Matt Hall and whoever the new Senate Majority Leader is to see if we can't get moving right away. But by Constitution, they don't get started until a couple weeks into January. But on day one, certainly I would issue an executive order ending DEI in state government, right? And the irony of that is, Garrett, is that when you were finishing up your career, as a Bronco, or a little after that, there was a woman named Jennifer Gratz who sued the University of Michigan. And if you remember it, went to the U.S. Supreme Court over affirmative action. She was a straight A student, white, working class young lady from downriver and Detroit, and she was denied because of affirmative action. So I took up her cause. The then Governor Granholm wanted me to file an amicus supporting U of M. I said, hell no. On the phone call, I said a few words different than that to Governor Granholm. And 2 months in office, the Detroit News had 2 photos facing each other. President Ford and brand new elected Mike Cox facing off over affirmative action. And that ultimately led to, I worked with Jennifer Gratz, Warwick Connerly, who were big names in banning affirmative action to get the Michigan Civil Rights Initiative part of our Constitution in 2006. So I've really been on DEI and other issues like fighting the advent of illegal immigration really for 20 years now. And so day one, getting back to your question, day one, I would issue executive order. Why is that? I mean, people out there say, well, we have a constitutional amendment, but the current Democrat regime does not respect it, right? So you have the current Attorney General, Dana Nessel, who has a chief DEI officer, thumbing her nose at the Michigan Civil Rights Initiative, part of our Constitution now, which prevents the use of race, gender, or other factors in hiring, contracting, and school admissions. And everyone out there knows that how they're thumbing their nose at it. And every county, most counties in Michigan are thumbing their nose at it. Most big cities like Detroit and others are thumbing their nose at it. Day one, I would defund DEI. What else would I do? With your permission. Number one is we're going to eliminate the state income tax. And I'll get back to it. Number two, reenact a right to work. Number three, Doge Michigan government. Number four, focus on the ABCs, not the DEI. And really, number five is related to that, revolutionizing education here in Michigan. And hopefully, in the course of the next hour, we get into those five things, and I'll walk you through them.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of like the similar things that I'm seeing with a lot of the gubernatorial candidates right now is the kind of like the same platform, which happens as Republicans, right? Our platform is going to be very similar in what we want to do. Doge of Michigan is very popular. Obviously, the state income tax. You're seeing the property income tax being brought up. DEI, obviously. It's basically everything that the American people and what they voted for President Trump is what they want to enact here in the state of Michigan, which I 100% agree with you. If we all come together with that type of messaging, I think we went up and down the ticket because the majority of people are done. Okay, so I want to move in. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. But there's a difference, right? A couple of things. Number one, of anyone who's going to run for statewide office, I'm the only one who's actually beat a Democrat, right? I'm the only one twice in bad Republican years. And number two, I'm the only one who's ever done it before, meaning this. When I talk about doging state government, I've actually done it. The day I walked into the Attorney General's office, from that day to the day I left, my staff went down 20%. Where does that happen anywhere in government? The only other person who did that is Terry Lynn Land, who at the Secretary of State. No one ever does that. In fact, since I left office, the current Attorney General has grown the staff by 50%. 50% during a time when our state is struggling. Another thing, people talk about doging Michigan state government. Like I said, I did it there. I collected $200 million in Medicaid fraud, 28 times what anyone else had done before. My office did. Our team did. It's not me. It's the team you put together. So the difference is I've actually done it. And if people go to my website, Mike Cox 2026, they're going to see I'm just not a platitude. Garrett, if you go there and you read, I got 45, 50 pages of material on all those issues, why it matters, how it can be done. I'm not just like putting a line on an issues page. And I invite people to go look at that.
So a big thing too, and this is what I want to move into, is corruption. Right. So we got the terrible three, right? Whitmer, Benson, and Dana Nessel. And they've kind of watched each other's back at everything that they're doing with, them getting away with obviously the draconian measures, the unconstitutional lockdowns and the mandates. You kind of like with the elitist mentality of do as I say, not as I do with with Governor Whitmer, right, sneaking down to see her dad when she told us we couldn't see our loved ones in nursing homes. The list goes on and on. Jocelyn Benson was allowing a Chinese national who jumped ship and is back in China right now with no accountability. Jocelyn Benson refusing FOIA. The list goes on and on with corruption. And I think that's what a lot of people are just fed up with is the corruption. There's no accountability. So as your time in Michigan Attorney General, because you served 2 terms, correct?
Right.
You had the authority to go after corruption. Name some times where you took down corruption, Republican or Democrat.
Sure. I had at least 73 corruption investigations that led to convictions. For instance, if folks out there know what ISDs are, that's like they're the big bureaucracy behind your local schools at the county level generally. We prosecuted the head of the Oakland County ISD, the second largest one in the state, and sent him to prison for embezzling money. I prosecuted former Mayor Kwame Kilpatrick. I prosecuted a lot of other folks that were names then but aren't anymore. Former Representative George Cushenberry. We prosecuted folks for clerks, the Core City Clerk, for election fraud. Ballot harvesting with absentee ballots. So that's part and parcel. We created the first public corruption unit in the AG's office. We created the first cold case unit in the AG's office. You read my bio. I ran prosecution. By the time I ended up in Wayne County, ironically working for a Democrat who's now running as a fake independent. He got elected as the elected boss, but I've been a careerist there. I had 14 lawyers who every day all we did were homicides. And, that steels you. The Marines made me kind of tough. And I have a stupid tattoo on my arm that memorializes that. But being a homicide prosecutor really prepared me for politics, because every time you went before a jury, you were talking to voters and you had to speak their language. And I think that really helped me later on in 2002, 2006, when the gubernatorial nominee was losing, when the U.S. Senate nominee was losing, I won. I'm the only Republican who ever beat Gary Peters. Then 4 years later, I had to turn back voters. Of so many of them, Garrett, were Democrats, working Democrats, like the people I grew up in Redford, Michigan, right? And I could relate to them, because not only did I fight over affirmative action, but for instance, I was the first, that I believe, in the first attorney general in the country in 2007. I instructed our Secretary of State and state government, you can't issue illegal licenses, driver's license to illegals. And what had happened is Terry Lynn Land had found out about it. She talked to me about it. And so I issued an attorney general opinion on that. Other issues that Republicans talk about now, school choice. So in 2003, Governor Granholm was very much like Governor Whitmer, trying to clamp down on school choice, right? Yeah. And charter schools. Well, I issued an attorney general opinion, which was huge in the community at the time for charter schools, which said that public schools had to accept charter school students to come back if they so choose. Because what the public schools would say is, if you leave, you may not be able to come back, even though we're supposed to be a public school. I issued an opinion on that. I issued opinions on gun rights, reciprocity. There were 6 states that if you had a CPL before I got in the office, that you could drive to safely carrying your concealed weapon. By the time I left, it was up to 36. And the other 14, you have to sign agreements with the state. The other 14 were largely Democrat states, not all, but largely Democrat states that wouldn't sign an agreement with us. So all the things people, yak about now, I've actually done an awful lot of them.
So with the good old boys and girls club in Lansing, Republican and Democrat. So one of the things that I've seen people talk about online about not only you, but a few other candidates too, is just the amount of time you've been in politics, the establishment, as we say, right? So have you done anything to change that system and not work within that system?
Okay. Well, let's get real. Okay. Let's pull back. I'm 62 years old. In my working life, I've spent 8 years as an elected official. I've been working, if you want to start when I was 9 years old with the Detroit Free Press route, I've been working for 53 or 4 years. Maybe that makes me seem too old, but I don't think so.
The Irishman in you.
Yes. But let's think. So the 3 years I spent in the Marine Corps, does that make me a politician? No. Did the 13 years I spent as a homicide prosecutor, as a public service employee, right? I wasn't an appointee. Does that make me a career politician? I spent 8 years in office, and I've gone away for the past 12 years, and I left thinking I'd never be back. Not because I didn't love it, but because I thought it was just a new phase. And the condition of our state has really brought me back. So I've spent more years building a business, my own business. It's not my dad's business. It's not my grandfather's business. It's not the business my great-grandfather started 100 years ago. It's my business, Garrett. Just like you started your medical practice on your own. So the folks who want to say that I'm a career politician either don't know or are lying to themselves. So what did I do to change it? Well, I just talked about some of those things. I stood up, God bless President Trump, who, by the way, I was his lawyer for Election Day security. The RNC and the Trump campaign hired me to go into federal court, whether it be in Grand Rapids or Detroit. That came down from the president's legal counsel, Mr. Warrington, to represent President Trump. But so what? God bless him. So what did he campaign on? Let's stand up for the workers, not the outsourcers. That's who I am. That's where my family is. That's why I'm talking. That's why I was talking about personal income tax cuts in 2010, and why I'm talking about eliminating the income tax now. What else do you talk about? Let's end DEI. Well, I helped end it in Michigan, but unfortunately, once Governor Snyder lost and Bill Schuette lost, the Democrats started to cheat on it. He talked about illegal immigration. I stopped the state from issuing licenses in 2007. And as importantly, I'm blanking on the bill number. I want to say it was Senate Bill 1070. I don't know if you remember this, Garrett. In 2010, Jan Brewer, the governor of Arizona, they were so fed up along the southern border. And this is before Greg Abbott came along and did what he does, that Jan Brewer passed a law. She was the governor of Arizona. She enacted a law to allow state cops to stop and detain illegals. And when she did that, her own attorney general wouldn't defend her. But I led efforts with 10 other states, and Greg Abbott, the governor of Texas, was part of this, to defend her in federal court. And ultimately, we won the right of states to do that in front of the U.S. Supreme Court. So when you say, what did I do to change it? Those are any number of issues. You pick any Trump issue, I've been there.
Have you supported Trump ever since the beginning, even though he was like in 2016, like very?
Yeah, I've supported him since the first debate. Okay, I was a Jeb Bush guy.
Yeah, you were a Mitt Romney guy too, weren't you, in the past?
No, I was with McCain over on in 2012. I was with Mike Huckabee. Mike Huckabee endorsed me, so I was with Mitt when he won the nominee in 2012. I wasn't with Obama. Okay.
Yeah. Well, no.
All right.
We all can say that.
Yeah. So I've always been for lack of a better term, the rabble rouser. Right. In 2008, that was, that was John McCain versus Mitt Romney. Right. Yeah. And during that time, Mike Huckabee and I became, I won't say close, but very friendly. And he was a great guy, and he endorsed me in 2010. And what was great about him is that he kept in touch with me after I lost. I mean, that's a quality of individual is just character inside, right? But so in 2016, I gave President Trump money. Look, I was building my own business. I was working literally 80 hours a week. When I was in school, I never did all-nighters. In this office with my staff, we did all-nighters. My son graduated in 2018, the one that went to the Naval Academy, and I worked 36 hours during that weekend, going to his graduation, and then dinner party, and then going back to work while he was going out with his friends. So, I wasn't like in politics then. And part of it was because I was building a business for my family. The other part was my wife was a state rep. And I didn't want to be Bigfooting anyone, right? I didn't want, it's like, it's only one at a time. We have kids, family commitments. 2020, my wife spent 2 years working for the president. And I probably gave $3 or $4 grand. And same time in 2024. And I'd be sitting here late at night, 8 o'clock, and I'd see a debate or a commercial. And President Trump's a little different. He only, in a lot of ways, but it used to be presidential candidates come in and do all these fundraisers, local fundraisers. He just hits the top people and then raises the rest online. So I would just get online. It's a grand here, a grand there. Ever since that first debate in Cleveland, it was I turned to my wife and I said, Jeb Bush did great things on education in Florida, which he did. But, when I saw President Trump, I just knew that dude was a force of nature, and he was going to remake the party to make it look more like the folks that could be supported by the folks I grew up with. Right? I grew up in a working class neighborhood. No one in my neighborhood had ever gone to college.
That almost sounded like Kamala Harris for a second when you said that. That's the stain that I grew up in a working class family. Remember you were saying that?
Yes.
She ruined it for us all, Mike.
Well, but anyone with any brain would just look at her wiki page and see both her parents were college professors.
Exactly.
You know, the
neighborhood she grew in was not middle class.
No. In fact, a little tidbit: if you Zillow the house I grew up in, right, and Zillow the house J.D. Vance grew up in with his grandparents, his grandparents' house is worth more than the house I grew up in. So I don't know how else to put it.
Man, my trailer's not even there anymore.
Yeah, it's exactly.
Like the whole deal. Real quick, I'm a healthcare professional in the state of Michigan. Just like you hit on DEI, we have a thing in the state of Michigan that Governor Whitmer hammered through during the Floyd protest called implicit bias training.
Right.
That I have to take every 2 years to basically teach me not to be racist in my clinic.
Right.
Will you get rid of that to all the healthcare professionals in the state of Michigan?
See, I can do that on day one with an executive order. So that would be included in that order I talked about. Absolutely.
I appreciate that.
Look, I fought DEI. When I was in the Marines, by and large, everything was merit-based. Then I got to U of M, right? And it stopped being merit-based, right? Then I wanted to work in the community I grew up in, right? I grew up on the west side of Detroit, the border. Anyone out there knows, like Rouge Park. I used to play in Rouge Park when I was a kid. And so I went to Wayne County. I didn't know any Democrats. I'm kind of, politicians. I got through their civil service process, and immediately, under John O'Hare, who I worked for 11 years, he was elected boss. He was a Democrat. He was the guy you had to report to, just like anyone else you have a boss. He was a believer in quotas. Then Mike Duggan came in, and everything was a quota. And so in 2006, when affirmative action was on the ballot and every other Republican wouldn't put their hand up, I put my hand up. There were 3 people, Brooks Patterson, Candace Miller, and I. The rest of the Republican Party wasn't there yet. God bless Donald Trump for bringing them there. And we're there now. So that's a long answer to your question. So the answer is yes.
Okay. And President Trump obviously I agree with you, has changed the party. It's not the old Republican Party, that's for sure. It's new and improved, I guess we could say. Red flag laws.
Right.
You for them or against them?
What we have in Michigan doesn't have enough due process. Look, there are procedures you need to have because there's in a state of 10.4 million people, there's going to be some folks who are off the wall, right? But traditionally, that's always happened in the probate court through involuntary commitment. So if someone's a threat to themselves or to others, that's the standard. That law was already taken care of. It's just red flag laws is a bit of a shortcut instead of what was always traditionally done in probate court. So it doesn't afford enough due process. I'm not against the idea, because if I had a crazy neighbor, and I've had a few in the different houses I've lived in, who is a threat to himself or my wife or people and with a gun, there's a process that existed before red flag law. But so many of these Whitmer-led things are like phony extra flags. Like there's already something that takes care of it, but you want to add an extra law to make it look like you're being empathetic. And that's selling the public a false bill of goods.
Yeah, that's one of the things that, we're concerned about is the corrupt judicial system now, right? Like anyone can label you as a radical right-wing extremist, not under this administration, but the former administration, they literally could come in. Yeah, you get your day in court to get your guns back. But if you get a corrupt judge, as we are well aware of now, they're voting based on political ideology instead of the Constitution, which is scary for all of us. What about constitutional carry? Yes or no?
Yes. But I have to tell you, some would view what we have already as constitutional carry, right? Because you can carry your gun openly. And then there's, and I don't want to nitpick it. Part of it is like some states have 18 years old, others have 21 years old. But yeah, for the concept, I was always endorsed by the NRA, Michigan Coalition of Responsible Gun Owners. Like I said, people forget this because it became a way of life, of reciprocity, where, if you have if you can carry a concealed weapon now in Michigan, you can go to, I think it's up to 38 other states now. I did that. People forget that. So like I fix problems to make us freer. But I'm absolutely, look, the Second Amendment. I filed an amicus with other attorney generals supporting Heller. The Heller case is the one where Scalia wrote, yes, the Second Amendment isn't just about militias. It's also that there is a personal right to carry a firearm, and subject to reasonable restrictions. But there is a person that was a earthquake, when the Supreme Court did that with Justice Scalia. And I know a lot of gun rights folks don't even know what Heller is now, and I get that. You just want you want to protect your family and be able to hunt, and I get that. And so, I carried a weapon in the Marine Corps, and there were some goofy dudes around me who carried the same weapons, automatic weapons. And, the reality is the Second Amendment is what the Second Amendment is. People want to rewrite things, but that's what it is.
Amen. So let's get the elephant out of the room with a lot of candidates. Okay. Is fundraising.
Right.
Fundraising, which we are all well aware of, is a part of this evil game called politics. You have to have money to win.
Right.
You're not fundraising millions of dollars. I don't care how great your message is. It's never going to get out. You got to be able to fundraise. How much money are you putting in personally? And how much money do you think you need to win the primary? Not the general, the primary.
It's already a matter of public record. I put $1 million in. Right. Okay. And I say that because sometimes I feel a little embarrassed to say that, because I grew up the son of a carpenter. Right. And it's odd to say that. But I believe in not only my campaign, but in the future of the state. So I'm not only putting time in, I'm not only putting in, energy, I'm putting in my own money. So how much I'm going to put in, we'll see. I'm not, I don't make my money off of the big three, in DEI, trading with China kind of jobs. So, there's a limit, and I'm not a fourth or fifth generation trust fund person. So, but I believe it's important to go out and meet with people. So when I ran in 2010, I raised the most money outside of Rick Snyder. Rick Snyder spent $8 million, put in $8 million of his own, raised about $400,000. Between all my things raised $5 million. I think this is like a $5 million race, maybe as high as 10. Part of it is ultimately who gets in and how many people get in. So we have John James in right now, right? And so,
as you see, I'm smiling.
Yeah, and he has a right to do it, and I have nothing against that. But when he gets in, I'm going to point out the record. But at some point, the president can't make him go back to Congress.
Yeah.
But the calculus. Think about this: we're at 220 right now. If James' seat is lost, if he doesn't run, which it likely will be, that's 219 before any other race starts. And what you lose one more, and we've lost the majority.
And I'm not going to, because everyone already knows how I really feel about John James. Right. I've invited him on the podcast to have open conversation. They have not gotten back to me. I've had everyone on that's running or considering of running. Kevin Rinke's going to come on in a couple of weeks and talk. Right. And you shouldn't be afraid to answer tough questions, just like I'm having you on. I'm being fair. I'm hitting you with some good questions, right? And I'll do the same with him. But I agree with you. This is about not self-interest. This is about our country. And if you're going to give up a seat that might stop the Trump momentum that we all love getting up every single morning, I have a problem with that. And your voting record is garbage. Your conservative record is garbage. You almost lean like a Democrat. So I want to get to this, which I don't like people putting thumbs on scales. So I don't really like endorsements. You get endorsed by we the people. So now we have the DeVos family just threw in $5 million to John James's campaign, which, hey, it's their money. They can do what they want. But now with social media and everything else, we can call this out. They donated $5 million to John James. And now we have a PAC, which is going to be headed by Ronna McDaniels and Shane Wallace, who they said that it's going to help all Republican candidates.
Right.
I heard from the story that Brandon Hall broke that they were building this PAC to support John James. So, and they added on all Republican candidates. So how do you feel about that right now? Did you get a meeting with the DeVos family to pitch your ideas of what you want to do the state? I mean, you've been involved in Michigan politics for 2 decades. I would think you would get a meeting. Did you get a meeting?
Well, let me unpack a little bit of your question, okay? Because you had a lot of stuff in there. Okay. And some of it you may not like, may grind you a little bit, or some of your viewers. But when I was fighting for school choice in 2002, you know who else was? The
DeVos.
Dick and Betsy. Okay.
Yes,
and you said the DeVos family, but it was Dan DeVos and his wife, his wife is a very well-known fashion designer in New York. So Dick and Betsy are a little bit different. Like I can't take my brother's credits, and I certainly don't want to take all my brother's faults either, right? I have my own.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I don't, that's a little bit different. And I remember fighting on election issues with Betsy DeVos when she was the state party chair. And sometimes when you're the elephant in the room, it's really easy for people to shoot at you, and I get that. And I know a root of a lot of it is when Betsy, the way she resigned from President Trump's cabinet, right? And
January 6th.
But another thing we have to remember, Betsy was one of the first people to advocate to get rid of the Department of Education, right? So, and so, it's like people are as simple as black and white. So, but my point is, hey, I would love to get Dick and Betsy's support. I would love to get President Trump's support. But I realize I got to build my own team, and I'm boss and I'm bought. All right. Anyone who knows anything about me, like I said, in 2006, every Republican was looking the other way in affirmative action. I raised my hand. In 2007, 2010, when Republicans didn't want to talk about illegal immigration, Cox was raising his hand. So I'm my own guy, Garrett. It's that simple. And I'll put it this way.
I'm going to stir the pot now.
All right, well, stir it some more.
I'm not running for office. I plan on never running again. How about that? Yeah. That's going to freak everyone out now because I'm going to speak my mind. No, you're right, though. Like, look, I have no problem with anyone supporting any other candidate. But what I do have a problem is, and I've been very vocal on this, is when you pick your ball up and go home after the primary. So if you're going to throw $5 million into John James, DeVos, whatever PAC that did that or organization, that's fine. That's who you support. You can throw $100 million. However, if John James doesn't win and then you keep out that treasure chest to a Republican primary winner, that's where I'm having a problem. Because then I'm starting to think, is this a good old boys or girls club, or are we getting behind Republican candidates? Because the same thing happened to Mike Rogers in the general. Like, I didn't support Mike in the primary. He wasn't my candidate, but he won. And in the general, I supported Mike. And there was a lot of people in the state of Michigan who did not vote for Mike in the general, and we gave that seat up to Elisa Slotkin. Another instance, and these were grassroots libertarian people that could not vote for that candidate for other reason, and they just stayed home out of spite, but that's a vote for Democrats. That's where I have a problem with anyone that's just going to cut tail and run after the primary. Like, let's come together. Let's bring this for the primaries. Let's get it all out. Support your candidate. Love on your candidate. But after the primary, we must unite to beat Democrats. And they're not even Democrats. They're far left extremists now.
Yeah, 100%. And you don't know all my background. So when I lost it in 2010 to Rick Snyder, and he and I got into a lot. We had debates, and he stopped coming to debates after we got into – I emptied all my political accounts out and gave it to him. There wasn't much left because I didn't I wasn't going to leave the last dollar in there. And anyone who does that, it's kind of funky. But I gave whatever political money I had left to him and Bill Schuette to help the top of the ticket. The guy who just beat me, I gave money to. I start off in politics, and you get a lot of people who are county chairs, precinct delegates, district chairs. I started out politics as a precinct delegate, right? And because I wanted to fight against the Clintons, and that's what I got started in the 90s. And then I became a county chair. I became a district chair. When I left, in that I was a policy chair immediately after I was attorney general, doing the stuff with precinct delegates. So, I may not have been out front. I'm a guy when I'm not in the seat, I'll stand behind the person in the seat to help them win.
That's perfect. That well said. Okay, absolutely. So you mentioned Rick Snyder, and if I recall, Rick Snyder was very passionate about education too.
Right.
He was. So you mentioned education in the things that you wanted to get done, and obviously everyone that's watching has been engaged in politics, and our education system is just getting killed.
Right.
Literacy, I mean, we're ranked 44th in the nation in reading. I mean, it's really, really bad. What is your plan for education?
And I'm glad you asked that, because like I said, my parents are immigrants. They both came here, one from Scotland, one from Ireland, for the opportunity that Michigan presented. And they didn't know each other, but they both plunked here, and they're both still alive. And they plunked on this state because it was the greatest. So in their lifetime, it's gone from the best to almost the worst. And education, when you talk about education, your numbers are actually a little wrong the way I see it. So we're tied at 44th, but I really view that we're 47th because there's only 2 states below us, New Mexico and Alaska. And that's amongst fourth graders. And you think about fourth grade reading, kids first learn to read and then they read to learn, right? So, and so that's the canary in the coal mine. And for me, I last Memorial Day weekend, I went to see my oldest granddaughter, Grace's graduation in Hernando, Mississippi. And so people run around now talk about the Mississippi Miracle. I've been watching it. And when my daughter, when she got out of the Marines and moved to Mississippi, I'm like, honey, what is the matter with you, right? And she said, but they got good Republican governors here, Dad. I said, yeah, okay. And I said, but you can't get your kid educated there. But now the kids in Hernando, Mississippi, get a better education than the kids where I'm at in Livonia, Michigan, right? And Livonia, like out your way, was like a Portage. It was like a place where it's a mix of some people with money, some people working class folks, but every kid could get ahead. When I grew up in Redford, every parent believed that their kid could do better. So what would I do? Universal school choice, increased school choice is what I've been talking about for 20 years, Garrett. I've been talking about it and doing it. Look at my attorney general opinions. I know you had Kevin Kayeski on last week talking about attorney general opinions. I issued an opinion in 2003, which boom. What else?
Are those opinions on your website? All the opinions that you did?
No, they're on the attorney general's. They're on the attorney general's website.
Okay, just curious. Yeah. I didn't know if people could actually go through and read them, but okay.
Yeah. So if you can read from 2003 to 2010. So grade every school. Let me restart. Universal school choice. Grade every school. Transparency. So I don't have my phone. This phone here, right? This phone, I can order Uber, and hopefully I want to run out the clock because it's very important. I can order Uber driver, right? He or she can be 15 miles from me, and it tells me when they're going to arrive, what kind of car, and so on. And it tells them what kind of customer I've been, right? And what my stars is, right? But we can't get like weekly transparency from our public schools, on our phone, like how our kids are doing. Did they go to school every day? That we have the 5th highest truancy rate in the country right now. That was one of the COVID things. And I want to get back to COVID in a second if we can. But so I would universal school choice, grade every school. We need to focus on too much of public education is over-regulated in this sense. If you go to the public education code, it's massive. For me, I would say I would first and foremost measure, can you get third and fourth graders to read? If you can, we will incentivize you, right? We don't need to have tests every other year, every 2 years. If we know your school system can teach kids to read, the rest will follow. And so I want to strip away some of the overregulation, and there's other things. I have this idea and I want to investigate it more, but we teach our kids too much in the early grades. By that, I mean, the two most important things are math and reading. Now we're teaching kids DEI crap and stuff like that. But even social studies, teach a little bit of U.S. history, Michigan history is helpful. But if we want our kids to read, we need to focus teachers' attention primarily on reading. And then we'll be able to first meet and then surpass all the other states in math and fourth grade reading. That's what Mississippi did. That's what I saw with my own grandkids. And so I want to look, teachers get a bad rap. Most teachers go in the business because they want to do well. But I have a friend who's retiring this year from Livonia. Check this out. And this is happening everywhere. Now, she runs the English department in her high school. And if she told a kid, so we're Tuesday, if she told a kid, have your paper due on Tuesday, the school district says you don't have to turn it until Thursday because the teacher can't mark you down until Thursday. So it undermines the teacher and really helps socially promote the kid. Westland schools, I have a friend in Westland schools. They used to, if you didn't turn in a paper, you got a 0.
Yeah.
Now you get a 50.
Yeah.
And why is that? So they can get you to 70 with fake 50, so they can push you on and socially promote you. So, but most teachers are against that, but we have superintendents who are just probably beat down. And so I want to empower teachers, quite frankly, incentivize them, merit pay. I want at the lower grades, because that's where it's more important. I want more focus as Mike Duggan talked about this $4.5 billion plan. I've been talking about this for 6 months. I've been talking about the Mississippi Miracle because I've lived it. Let me tell you one personal story, which I hope drives it home for you and your viewers. My younger granddaughter, Savannah, and I'll get a little carried away, so I'll try and slow it down. COVID comes along, right? And she is in 4th grade. And at one time we thought she's severely autistic. But at that point she was half day special ed and half day, and I'm sorry, keep it looking, I might be looking down because I'm looking at you on this screen. So
you're right.
So half day special ed, half day special or Main Street. They closed down 3 weeks during that spring. 3 weeks during the spring of 2020. And that girl kept going, man. She kept churning along. And they didn't shut down when she got to 5th grade at all. That was the 2020 fall, 2021 spring term, where Livonia was closed half the time or more, right? Yeah. And other schools and poorer schools were more impacted. So my autistic granddaughter, over the 4 years of COVID or post-COVID, is now just finished 9th grade last week because they get a little bit done a little earlier in Mississippi. And she was in 10th. I had a 10th grade math class as a 9th grader. But I got kids in my neighborhood, some of my neighbors' kids, or some of my some of the people who I've known or friends whose kids fell apart. That's the difference leadership makes. So it's not just the policies you're talking about, it's consistent leadership.
No, that's a fact. You're in my wheelhouse now with COVID and everything that I stood up for. That the catastrophic consequences, we're living it now. That I talked about it back then, what was going to happen with these lockdowns and keeping these kids at home and yada yada yada. Everybody knows that story, but we're living it now. So
absolutely. And one other thing, not to beat my chest, but you talked about being Trump or part of the change. Well, like I said, you probably didn't know I was Trump's lawyer for election day security. I was also Unlock Michigan's lawyer. And I won at the Court of Appeals in the Supreme Court when Mark Brewer, the former chair of the Democratic Party, tried to get the petitions knocked out. But then, of course, the Michigan Supreme Court and the different case involving the restaurant owners and the gym owners, they decimated the Governor's Emergency Powers Act, and so then unlocked as a citizens initiative kind of disappeared then because its purpose was gone. But I was unlocked lawyer.
Thank you. We the people thank you.
Well, but I got to tell you, I was just a lawyer. The people did the real work are the ones who got the petitions.
That's right. The grassroots, baby.
The grassroots, 100%.
539,000 signatures in 80 days, Mike.
Yes.
We dominated that petition, which it was a heated time, obviously. So obviously, we know where you kind of stand with COVID because you're right in there with us. What about mandates? The vaccine mandate, obviously, are you for or against?
I have a different answer than you might have. Okay. First and foremost, I don't have all your medical degrees, right? And I grew up in an era where everyone got vaccinated, right? I went in the Marine Corps, and in boot camp on day 2, they walked you through, and they had guys on both sides of you with guns shooting you in the arm. Probably the same in the arm. So, but that, of course, were like the basic vaccines have been around forever. I have a granddaughter who's autistic, so sometimes I don't think any vaccines cause autism. I haven't seen it, but that whole debate raised my sensitivity. So here's my view. Like if you're talking about the COVID vaccine, vulnerable people, I think it was important that they got it. My parents, but adults, kids didn't really need it, and adults should have had a lot more freedom to choose. It's that simple.
So personal choice or mandated?
Well, if we're talking about,
let's say any vaccine, let's not go COVID. Let's talk about medical freedom itself. So you are for the CDC recommendations, like if those kids don't get fully vaccinated, then they shouldn't go to school? Or being allowed to be going to school?
Yeah, if we're talking about measles, mumps, tuberculosis, yes. The ones I got, yes. Because
so you're saying those kids should not be allowed in public schools if they don't get fully vaccinated according to the CDC recommendations? On
that, yes.
Okay,
but,
so
now, I'm not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Meaning, because if we got the science wrong on COVID, that doesn't mean the science was wrong on measles and mumps and the other vaccines that have worked. And polio. Okay. I mean,
so are you familiar with? Now you're in my wheelhouse. So
okay.
we gotta talk about this.
Well, I will say this. I don't have all the science degrees you have. So
it doesn't matter. It's not even the science degrees, Mike. It's just literally parents doing their own research. It's all online. So you don't need a degree to understand this. And we're going to cut it down and make it very simple because I'm going to give you some homework.
Yeah.
Because if you look prior to 1986, the number of vaccines that the CDC recommended was very small. It was like 8. And it was the ones that you're talking about: measles, mumps, rubella, stuff like that. But there was a law passed by Ronald Reagan in 1986 that said any pharmaceutical company is not going to be held liable for any injuries or deaths that those vaccines cause. So as these big businesses, big pharma as we call it, what do you think would happen? You think the number of vaccines went up or down according to the CDC?
I'm sure they went up, but
you know how much?
I don't.
It's almost 100 compared to what you and I got when we were younger to 8.
Well, then you're helping me. When you say your vaccines, I think about it, my child vaccines, right? Because I knew people with polio. It's gone now, but there are kids with polio in my neighborhood, and the polio vaccine worked. It's that simple. Are we over medicated and overshot today? Yes, 100%.
So where do you draw the line, though, to medical freedom? Medical freedom is pretty much black and white to me. You're giving that personal choice to that person.
Right. Well,
because if you're vaccinated against measles, Mike, why do you care if I'm not? Because if you got the vaccine, you should be protected.
That's a good question. But I think we've had decades of research supporting measles and mumps and polio. And it's that simple. Now, do I agree with you that should every vaccine be look, I don't know what some vaccines can come along tomorrow. There might be a vaccine on stopping psoriasis, okay? And and if you ask me, oh, well, should everyone take that so they don't get psoriasis? No.
So let's go back to 2020. Operation Warp Speed. They got the COVID vaccine through. mRNA technology, right?
Right.
At the time, we were lied to, and they said that if you get this vaccine, you're not going to get it, you're not going to spread it, and you're not going to die.
Right.
Right? Those are the three things that were said. And then they mandated it.
Right.
So at that time, according to you, because this was supposed to wipe out humanity, 10% of us were supposed to die from COVID, right? That's over what, 30 million Americans? We came up a little short in that estimate, right?
About 1 million, right?
Yeah. So according to you, if they were in fact saving people, and I was like, dude, I'm not taking this. There's no long-term safety and efficacy studies. You would be like, no, you need to take this, right? Were you for that?
No, I'm not. I didn't say that, Garrett. What I said.
I'm giving you a hypothetical.
No, don't misstate what I said.
Okay.
I said adults, which is like you and I.
Yep.
I would have given the right to choose. Okay. Every disease is different. I think we can agree, right? So my daughter, who is an emergency room nurse in Mississippi, never took it. Right. I didn't find that out until after. And so I do distinguish though between COVID and measles and polio and some of the other diseases where generations of children, including yourself, and everyone else out there was protected from.
How do you know I'm vaccinated?
Because at your age, you would have gotten measles or mumps or whatever.
Not necessarily.
You go to public school. Are you saying you're not? Are you saying you never had a measles or mump?
You can go and you can opt out for religious and philosophical reasons.
Okay, but did you?
I got some of them when I was little.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
But that's the point is I believe in medical freedom. That's where we'll disagree on, and that's fine. Like, hey, this is where people need to have these conversations and understand that you and I are not going to agree on 100% of the issues. I just am very strong against medical freedom because, like you said, I have a background in the healthcare industry. I worked for the pharmaceutical industry. I worked in places where we did research on these things with animals, and I've seen how these things get put through. So different belief system, but that's okay. I mean, I think you did great on all the other questions. But hey, we're running out of time. I got one question, though, because we didn't get to, which I'm also very passionate about, and I want to make sure I give you your time. Energy. We didn't talk about energy in the state of Michigan.
Right.
What is your plan for energy in the state of Michigan?
A number of things, right? It's all the above. We need to push all the above. So a couple of things. We need energy competition, right? And what that means is I talked about my son who's in the Navy, right? Went to Naval Academy. Half the kids who graduated with him, 400 or 500, all work on nuclear powered surface ships or submarines. And so we've had for 70 years, 65 years, nuclear reactors floating all around without a problem. So we should push more nuclear energy. The irony is in Europe, they're way ahead of us. France, as crazy liberal socialists as they are, they understand that nuclear is safe, clean, and effective. You know, right now in Michigan, the two most important sources are coal power plants and natural gas. Because when you turn on the light behind you, or I turn on the light in my office, that we can count on those two things: solar and the other, new renewables we can't, and so they cost more. And so I'm against whipsawing the energy companies on mandates for EV stuff, not EV stuff, but renewable stuff. So I'm all about more competition, more of the above, but let the market decide. And the market will decide for natural gas and coal. In fact, you said, what did you do different? Well, I fought for years against Governor Granholm trying to do mandates, right? And even after I got out of office, I spoke out against them. And in fact, we pushed them off. They didn't come in until Whitmer was in. I went and testified in front of Barbara Boxer, the crazy former senator. And I was there with the governor. Our governor wouldn't go. I was there with the governor of Ohio, New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, testifying about the damage it would do to manufacturing. So I'm all about more competition and let the market decide in energy. That's kind of a glossed over answer, but that's where I'm at.
No, as a common sense answer, right? I mean, just all above approach makes sense to me, with a heavy emphasis on natural gas and nuclear. And one thing that people aren't aware of is China is going to overtake our nuclear fleet by 2030. They're building tons of reactors.
Yeah.
They have hundreds more planned. And with all this AI and everything else that's being built right now, we're going to have the energy to do all this technology. And nuclear is the most energy dense, just like you said, cleanest that you can do. And you can recycle most of the radioactive waste now. Now they have the small modular reactors. I mean, obviously I'm very passionate about nuclear power. That's what I ran on. But it has to make sense. And I agree with you, all the above approach. Let's do it all. Make it cheap, make it competitive, and let the people benefit.
And Michigan, natural gas, we have these geographical chasms, which make us natural for natural gas. We could be exporting and making money off of natural gas, but Biden stopped that, right? And hopefully, with the president's moves, our Michigan energy industry, which has been a little dormant, can start to grow again, create more jobs.
Yep. Amen. Mike, thank you so much for your time. We went over, but you got a good hour and 6 minutes on, man, to explain your platform. Where can people go to find out more about you?
They can go to Mike Cox 2026, really easy. And I encourage people, go to my issues page, because you go to any other gubernatorial candidate out there right now, and you go to their issues, they'll have nothing. They won't talk about anything. They won't identify the problems, and they won't talk about solutions, but I do. And that's going to be evolving, obviously. But I'm so happy to be, I realize you're going to be with Renke. I'm actually going to go on Renke's show, because I'll go talk to anyone, because it's important to me. I'm at this 7 days a week, and I'm going to grind it out. It's that simple.
Well, I don't know if Kevin's going to win or not.
You're talking to the winner. I won twice before, and so I'm looking forward to you on January 1 of 2027. You show up at the Capitol. It'll be freezing cold, but you show up there, and you come to my office, and we start signing all the executive orders.
Well, I'll be there for the implicit bias training, that's for sure. And no, just like I said, if you win the primary, you're going to get my 100% support, and I'll do everything I can to get you to win in that general. That is for sure. So I appreciate your time, my man.
All right. Take care.
Have a great day.
You too.
Bye-bye. All right. That was a long interview, hour and 7 minutes with Mike. He answered a lot of questions, and that's what we do at the Grassroots Army. I don't agree with him on the medical freedom. We disagree there, and obviously you guys know why I disagree, but that's okay. That is just some things that people may like or may not like. Me personally, I'm 100% for medical freedom. I think that's one of his weak spots, but everything else, he said a lot of common sense, good stuff, and seems like a great guy, has a very impressive background. He's a Marine. I mean, what can you not like about that? But my job is to give you up-to-date, accurate, and truthful information. You guys need to do your research, your due diligence. Okay. So go check out Mike and all the other candidates. I've now had every single candidate on the show besides who didn't come on the show yet? John James. Where you at, John? Don't be Johnny in the basement. Let's not run a campaign like that, John. I will be fair, but I will hold you accountable. So come on the show, John. Let's have a good hour conversation. No script, just raw truth, because that's what we, the people, want. So all you folks out there, do me a favor. Start tagging John James and say, hey, go on the Grassroots Army podcast with Garrett Soldano and answer the tough questions, because we, the people, deserve to know the answers. That's it. And that's what I'll continue to do, is provide that information. Guess what? You're going to see my ugly mug here in 50 minutes as I go live again with a young lady who is creating a documentary about the Whitmer kidnapping and how the FBI was involved. She's coming on the show in 50 minutes. So I'm going to do a little wardrobe change. I'm going to change my t-shirt. And then I'll be back in 50 minutes going live again with her show, with talking about her documentary and what she has to say. That's going to be a nail biter, folks. You're going to have to tune in here in 50 minutes at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time to listen to what she has found and what she's going to expose. So I'm excited to have her on to have good, intelligent conversation. Other than that, I don't see you at 11. Have a great day. God bless you. God bless the state of Michigan, of course, and always. God bless these United States. Till next time.